Welcome to the Voice of Reason. This is your host, John Martin. We're here for another monthly show. It's amazing we can do this every month. I have with me tonight Robert Koenig and Dr. Garabedian. We haven't seen Robert for a while. I understand you were trying to sell topics to Bob Abraham on the Know the Facts show.
Yes, I have shot him a couple of emails.
And he said he turned you down.
Well, I wanted to do a rebuttal show right after his show. Someone could do a rebuttal of what he brings up to really get the facts straight.
You're okay. That's well. I'm going to start out this show with a couple of items that sort of lead into Garabedian's topic. I want to let you know why the town has a problem with their budget. It's not exactly what they pay out. It's what they have to pay out. When they did the Proposition 2.5, they set the budget for our town based on income that we had coming in, and you could not have everything with that kind of budget. They were a little bit tight in those days. Turns out, when they wanted to have, the #1 school and all that, we can't get close because we don't even have enough school buildings, not to mention staff and all that. And so every time a project comes up, we've only had one adjustment for taxes in all these years since they've had Proposition 2.5, and that was just so that school wouldn't deteriorate. Turned out we missed the target. Instead of having overcrowded schoolrooms forever, we built another middle school just right after that. So it worked out in the school department's favor, in that they could downsize the classes because they had the space. And somehow they found the money. I don't know how they found all this money. It's found money. They said there's no found money here, but how do you get bigger budgets if you don't find it somewhere? In any case, so the problems with our budget is the fact that Proposition 2.5 didn't have enough growth factor. I mean, our town's been growing. We've almost doubled in size since then. And somehow or another we managed. I know a lot of people donate. I mean, they donate fire trucks and vehicles to the police department, all this. Just money keeps rolling in, they keep buying stuff. But it doesn't show up in the budget because it's a gift.
Yeah, the fields that's how the fields are getting done with the new turf and everything.
Yeah, well, they had to pay out some money for that, but they raised a lot of money, that's for sure. But that's something that should have had a town vote on, saying, do you want to put out a couple $1 million a year to maintain these fields? I mean, we didn't even have enough fields. I mean, they're playing like 9 different sports on one field all through the year, but it gets pretty worn out. So it's a case where, you want sports programs, you have to have fields, you have to have certain conditions. Therefore, you can't be as good as St. John's. That Tim guy's got too much money over there. They can put a new field in anytime they raise.
They're doing one right now.
That's right. They're doing one right now. But they have more than one field, too. There's one across I don't know if you know, there's one across the street.
Right behind it, yeah.
For practice. At least that's what I heard was for practice. So, but it spreads out their practice fields. I mean, the high school field for Shrewsbury, they practice on, and all kind of games on there. It's amazing. It's when they find time to cut the grass. Everybody's running on it. So that's an initial problem that creates problems when you every year trying to figure out how to pay the bills. Now you can borrow money, you still got to pay the money, with interest. 1/20th plus interest every year, and so it's a tough situation for the budgeting. When they were bringing in the last superintendent, they didn't pay him market value. They found out what the market value was, and since he didn't have any experience as a superintendent, they decided to pay him lower, let him prove himself, which he did, which now he's making as much money as any superintendent around, because we caught up with that. So there we go, Garabedian.
Well,
Bring on the money.
bring on the money. What appeared in the June 24th issue of the Sunday Telegram was an article concerning superintendent salaries in central Massachusetts. And they listed 45 towns, well, shall I say 45 school districts in central Mass. And they provided the salaries for fiscal year 2018 and 2019 for most of the schools. Virtually every school reported a 2018 number, but some of them were missing for the 2019, so I didn't bother looking at that too much. And then it also provided the enrollment that each school district had. And I was just trying to see how these numbers were behaving. And my first task was to look at a sample of this data. So I said, what kind of a sample should I create? And the first thing that came to my mind was the sample that we always talk about here in Shrewsbury is the Assabet Valley Collaborative, which is a group of, what, I think 7 or 8 towns, 9 districts, in which we do things together of some sort. And you probably could define this a little bit better than I could, John, in terms of the role of this collaborative. But in any event, I keep on hearing the school committee, the members of the school department, even the selectmen refer to Assabet Valley Collaborative Towns. In any event, I was able to, from this list, extract 7 school districts. And I looked at the superintendent salaries, this is for 2018, for these districts, the enrollment, and I was able to secure the 2016 per pupil expenditure. I was able to extract the 2016-2017 SAT reading scores and SAT math scores, and also 2017 tax rates. I then proceeded to perform 5 computations of what we call linear correlation coefficient. The linear correlation coefficient is a derived formula that generates a number between -1 and +1, including -1, +1. The value will come out the same, be some value from negative to +1. If it comes out to be +1, that means that the 2 variables you are comparing exist in a perfect positive correlation, which is to say, as one variable gets large, the other gets large perfectly. And as one variable gets small, the other variable gets small. So that's a positive correlation. Now, if it's less than 1, then that correlation tends to weaken, but it still can be significant. If it's -1, then that's a perfect negative correlation, which is to say that when one variable gets small, the other variable gets large. And then when that variable gets large, the other variable gets small. And the computation always will produce a number. But in statistics, there is a procedure by which you can determine whether that number is significant. If it's not significant, it's virtually meaningless and you cannot come up with any kind of conclusion, or you shouldn't come up with any kind of conclusion. Now, the other thing that we should mention is that if 2 variables exist in a cause and effect relationship, then it is true that their correlation coefficient, whatever it be, is significant. From that, you can logically deduce that if the correlation coefficient is not significant, then the 2 variables do not exist in a cause and effect relationship. And I've used this procedure, this argument before when we talk about spending more money on education to impact test scores. In my previous examinations that go back perhaps over 10 years now, and I've done it several times, always have shown that there's no significant correlation. So therefore, there's no significant cause and effect relationship. That's based on the samples I've used. Now, that's not to say that if we don't use different samples or we continue this, we may find something. I don't know. That's research. In any event, for the 7 towns that I used, when I correlated salary versus the superintendent's salary versus the enrollment, it was not significant. So it seems that the size of the school district doesn't relate to the superintendent's salary, the number of students. It seems, and again, I cannot, based on this sample. When I compared salary to per pupil expenditure, same thing. Salary versus SAT reading scores, not significant. Salary versus SAT math scores, not significant. And then salary versus the real estate tax, not significant. And just as a side note, I did per pupil expenditure versus real estate tax. That was not significant either for the 7 towns in the Asset Valley Cooperative. What was...
Just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
are these all the major points that the school district brings up?
Yes, I've heard that in
Okay.
previous years. I think the year that I heard it the loudest, and that's a bad word. Let me correct my word. When it was more emphatic, let's say, was that year, because it was that year, or maybe it was in a previous year, because it wasn't the present superintendent that said that. It was a previous superintendent many years ago said that if we don't get more money from the schools, the SAT scores are going to decline. And he also said that the MCAS scores are going to decline. And I think that was the year that set me on my journey here to do these correlations. And I said, how can he say that? And the numbers prove that he was incorrect in saying that. You cannot make these assertions unless the numbers tell you that you're making these assertions. So I'm not making any assertions. I'm just saying what the numbers are saying. And what's important in all of our decisions we make, we have to make our decisions without our own opinions or prejudice, or call it what you wish, entering into that decision. And when we do that, then I believe we're going to have a higher probability of making the correct decision in anything that we do. I looked at these numbers for the superintendent salaries for the 7-town sample, and I found that the average salary of these superintendents was $183,257 for these 7 towns. The median salary was $179,000. In other words, that's the one that's physically in the middle. The superintendent's salary in Shrewsbury was $190,549. So he was ranked number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He was ranked number 5 out of 7 in the Asset Valley. Okay. And then I turned and I said, where does all of this fit into the entire Central Mass picture? When I looked at the Central Massachusetts, all of the 45 towns in Central Mass, actually I used 44 because the last town here was Quabbin, and it had its superintendent's salary as $102,830. And it had a note that that was a part-time superintendent. So I didn't count him. I deleted that one. When I looked at these other 44 salaries, the greatest one was $231,881, and that was the superintendent of the Blackstone Valley Regional Technical School. And that has 1,240 students. The smallest one was North Brookfield at $127,000 for 557 people. when I looked at those numbers, the average salary for the central Massachusetts, for all the 44 towns here, was $164,037. So the average for the Assabet Valley is at $183,257, 182.57. It's significantly greater than that. The median of the 44 towns in central Mass was $163,200. $163,200. For the Assabet Valley was $179,000. So you can see that the Assabet Valley towns are definitely at the higher end of the central Mass salary scale. When I looked at these 45 salaries, and he listed them in descending order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Shrewsbury was the sixth from the top,
With how many students?
with 6,214 students. And what's interesting is that Worcester had a superintendent's salary of $196,900, and his enrollment is $25,305. I'm sorry, students, not dollars.
That's about 5 times more.
Yes, it is. And as I looked at this, I says, I believe I have more work to do, and I didn't have an opportunity to do it because it takes some time to do this. I am in the process of correlating for these 44 towns the superintendent's salary with their enrollment. And I'd like to see if that comes out to be something significant. And just looking at these numbers, my intuitive feeling is that there isn't any. There's no correlation. I don't know what is driving salaries. I don't know if it is an actual, let's say, academic number. Is there some other force out there? What if it be SAT scores? Call it what you wish. What is that's driving salaries the way it is? And I'm not picking on superintendents. I'm just trying to understand how the system is working. That's all, through numbers.
Do all these towns also have assistant superintendents?
It didn't say that, but from my reading, most towns now have an assistant superintendent.
And how's our structure here? Do we have?
We have an assistant.
We have just one assistant
We
superintendent?
have two
Oh, we have two
assistants.
assistant superintendents.
Right. Actually, one of them is a position that was just created, a couple of years ago, John, when they took the business manager's position and they made it to assistant superintendent in charge of finance. It's the same person.
Oh, he came back, Collins, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's the same person. But they just took now whether if they changed his responsibilities or not, I don't know. But they changed the title, but it's basically the same position, as far as I can understand. But whatever it be, and you know, what we call job titles is one thing, in terms of what else has to be done is another thing. But why do we need all these things? Part of it, I think, is because of the bureaucracy of the federal government and the state government. Because I know that they keep on saying to the local towns, you must report this, you must report this, you must report this. So who's going to do all that work? That's an administrative task, so you need more people to do it. And I've oftentimes questioned, when all these numbers are sent to the state government or to the federal government, what do they do with them? Do we get any kind of analysis, and do we get any type of, let's say, positive recommendation, a posive type of direction? You must educate differently, or whatever you have to do, because this is what we found these numbers. I've never seen that come
I
out.
told you there are teams come out to every school district to see if you're doing the things that you're supposed to do. There are teams they have a home port in Worcester, and they go out to Shrewsbury, and they'll check on special education and different budget items that you have to see if you're following all the rules. And I just still remember years we got caught not doing so good. For instance, they had a special education class, well, one person getting their training in a closet. It was a big closet, They put nice lights on the front, and the special education teacher had their desk in there. But when they looked in there, I said, "There's no windows. It's a closet." I said, "You don't teach children in a closet." So they had to move that out. Another year, we got caught using all these one-on-one sessions in a big room in the middle school, and there was so much noise. But they only had little, 5 or 6 foot dividers, but you could hear everybody. So they came in one year and said, "This is not good." Yeah. And so that's when we got trailers to move more people outside and get out of that big room, because they had the person in charge of special education for that building was in that room. All the records were in there, all these file cabinets. And so they got the trailers to put all that section out of that room. Wasn't best fit, but it was a start.
Well, the question that hits my mind, Charlie, is that why can't we just have 3 working assistant superintendents and get rid of the main superintendent?
Well, I think probably that someone would say you need somebody to coordinate it. You need somebody that has to be ultimately responsible for the actions of everybody.
But that can be done at almost a regional level.
Right. If the 3 people, were working cooperatively, and all 3 had equal responsibility into what had to be done, I suppose so.
I mean, you've seen all this regionalization going on with all kinds of things now. Even the animal control department is
Right.
becoming regionalized. Why can't there be a central school superintendent
Right.
over a bunch of districts?
Right.
Save a lot of towns a lot of money.
Well, I think personally is that in my years of education, I've seen so many changes come about, and to me, they are nothing more than fads. Something will come along, oh, we're going to do this differently, and it's going to give us better results, and after a while, nobody really tests it, and then it goes away and it's replaced by something else. One good example of that is you just mentioned about the noise. They had these dividers set up. I can remember one time there was a move in education to make all classrooms open classrooms.
Yeah.
But they took down all the walls, and they had everything open. Students were able to interact with each other and move about, and it was ultimate chaos, and that didn't work
When I was
either.
in Maryland, one of my daughters was in a school like that.
Right.
And I went in to visit. You could sit in the back of the room of this class and hear all the other teachers. There was nothing to stop the sound from reaching your ear. It made little dividers, but it was around a room with open end. And so I didn't work out too well.
No.
But
But it was an idea. See, that came across as something that was put forth of the pulpit and say, we've got something new here, and this is really going to make things better. But it really doesn't. And the bottom line, and I repeated, and forgive me for repeating myself, but the bottom line to learning is basically 2 things. Number 1, you need a knowledgeable teacher that can communicate the subject and explain it in a way that students can understand, and be patient enough to explain it and explain it and explain it until the student understands. Because ultimately, that's what it takes to learn. Ultimately, that's what it takes to do anything, is patience and perseverance and in repeating things. And that's another fad that's gone away. You can't, I've heard this, it's been told to me that you can't expect the students to drill and practice, because it's drill and kill. What I don't understand is that if it's drill and kill in education, then how come it's not drill and kill out on that football field? People admire, I'm not picking on Tom Brady, I'm just using him as an example. There are thousands of examples. People admire Tom Brady and the Patriots for going out there and practicing hard because we must win the Super Bowl trophy, which is just a contrived championship. What does it really mean? Not much. It's a business.
Yeah, I mean, it's money.
Right, and everyone gets happy, but who's really benefiting? just the owners and the players, and it's a business entertainment. And we allow that. And even on the athletic field of the high schools, we admire them to go out there and practice till it's that because they've got the big Thanksgiving game. But when it comes to academics, that's frowned upon. So you need that, and you need teachers that are strong enough to be able to enforce that in the classroom. And secondly, and just as importantly, if not more importantly, you need students backed by parents that are going to go there and do that work. And if they do, they're going to come out to be good students.
Well, let's get to Rob a chance to get his 2 cents worth in today.
All right, guys. Yeah, I was just going to bring up some of the traffic issues that have been going on around Shrewsbury over the last few months, and some of the upgrades and some of the nice new things that we've seen in the Spags area. You can tell that by the parking lot, the project seems to have gone along very well. In fact, the last 2 stores, the vacant stores, were rented out in there. So it's very hustle and bustle in there now, although obviously Whole Foods is the most busiest of the stores, but there are some other stores that and restaurants that seem to also be bringing in the traffic.
How about the bank?
New bank in there, yeah, yeah. So it's interesting, you know, for me, someone who went to Spags growing up, going there to get deals as a kid when Spags was, you know, buying things, and now people go there to get the high end. So it's a complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So I do go through there. I don't buy too much. I do look around. I like to see what they have in the Whole Foods selections. It's interesting. But back onto the traffic issues and the updates that have been going on Route 9, which seem like years now, because I'm thinking back about 4 years ago when the state came in and they fixed the middle mediums. They came in, they re-cemented the middle mediums just to fix them up.
Right.
To have that basically tossed out because like 2 years later they wind up doing the whole project the right way and bringing in brand new mediums. So
Yeah, they're taller too.
they're taller. There were a lot of state waste going on with the first project, because if they knew down the line they were going to be bringing in these new ones, why didn't they bring them in right away? The other thing I still don't like is the fact that animals cannot get through those mediums. If there's an animal that wants to scoot, there should be holes,
Right.
opposed to them having to also look for an intersection that the animals can cross into. The big upgrades that we've seen recently are the new lights at Oak Street, Lake Street, South Street. Brand new lights have gone in, the old lights have come down, and they've got the pedestrian crosswalks there. And they also alternate the patterns for change when you're taking a left. So that's a big upgrade actually out of the Lake Street area, because now there's a green light to take a left. Both sets of cars don't come at
Right,
each other,
right.
and that's not aligned as it is. So there'll be more on this next month, John, if you want to.
Oh yeah, just be the 2 of us. I understand.
I'll have a good list next month of
Okay.
different
Well, we
things.
already have a date. We have a Thursday at 6 o'clock again.
Excellent.
It's not for you folks at 6. You can tune us in anytime on your computer. Which,
On demand.
well, yeah, on demand. There's Shrewsbury Connections, and then you can look up our Voice of Reason and any date you want, and get immediate service to your computer. Good night, all.